Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Coralpalooza Digital 2020. I'm joined now by Michelle Graulty, who works for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and she's going to be giving us a nice, easy overview on how you can distinguish between the different species of threatened corals that we have in South Florida.
Hi everyone, as Alex said, my name is Michelle Graulty and I am the Awareness and Appreciation Coordinator for the DEP Coral Reef Conservation Program. And within the Department of Environmental Protection, we are situated within the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection. So I know that's sure is a mouthful, and basically it means I'm in charge of all of the education and outreach related projects for the coral program. So today I'll be teaching you how to identify Florida's threatened stony corals. Florida's coral reef extends for 350 miles. It starts all the way up at the St. Lucie Inlet and extends down past Key West to the dry Tortugas. You can see here this bright teal box outlines the section of the reef that the Coral Reef Conservation Program manages, from the northern border of Biscayne National Park all the way up to the St. Lucie Inlet. Florida's coral reef is very, very diverse. Sharks, animals, plants, algae, and of course, stony corals. There are over 43 different species of stony corals, of which 7 are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. On the right, you'll see the staghorn and the elkhorn coral. These acropods were the first 2 species listed as threatened under the Act, and the other 5 were added later. Today, I'll be teaching you how to identify all 7 of these gorgeous and iconic species. But before we learn how to identify different species, we need to understand corals themselves a bit better. Corals are animals, and they're made up of thousands of genetically identical polyps that are all interconnected. I've got this handy model with me today that I'm going to show you guys to help understand the anatomy of coral. This 3D printed model is provided by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I can send you all the 3D file online for you to print your own. So the white segment here represents the skeleton. This is the corallite of a singular polyp. And the blue plastic represents the tissue that grows on top of the skeleton. So we've got the corallite, the polyp tissue, and at the top here we have the calyx. The calyx is the rim. Think of it kind of like the rim of a volcano. And with different corals, the calyx can either be protruding or flush with the skeleton or even sunken in. And you'll also notice these different lines here. These are all of the septa, which is plural for the word septum, which might sound a bit familiar, like the septum of your nose. So the biological definition of septum is pretty much a divider between 2 chambers. So all of these septa are dividing the chamber of the corallite. So with some species, you need to count the different septa to be able to identify what it is. Corallites can come in lots of different shapes and sizes. On the far right here, you can see that these corallites are kind of smushed together. And in the middle, the corallites are a bit more separated and they kind of look like stars. And this is what they look like with tissue on top of them, living corals. Here's another example of different corallites. On the far right and the far left, you can see the meandering corallites of brain corals. And in the middle, you can see the stalks of flower corals. Those corallites, as you can see, are very separated from one another. And again, here they are with living tissue. Now I'll be going over some different characteristics that can help you identify different species. The first is color. These acroporid species are always going to be an orangish brown color. We've got the staghorn coral on the left and the elkhorn coral on the right. Other species, like the mountainous star coral, can come in different colors. And it's important to remember that when you're getting deeper and deeper as you dive or snorkel, you can lose some of those red, orange, and yellow colors unless you have a proper strobe light or camera lens. Colony size can also be helpful in identifying different colonies. On the far left here, we have colonies that are nearly 2 meters in diameter. But on the right, this colony is about 6 inches wide. Polyp size can also help you identify different species. On the left, we've got a solitary polyp. They can grow to be about 6 inches. In the middle, these mountainous star coral polyps can grow to be about ½ inch. And on the right, we've got much smaller polyps. And again, the corallite calyces are coming into play. On the top left, you can see that the calyces, or the rims of the polyps, are protruding. In the middle, you can see that they're really flush with the rest of the coral. And on the right, you can see that they're sunken in. This is an example of different types of corals, but today we're going to be going over encrusting, mound, and boulder corals, one fleshy coral, and then a few branching and pillar coral species. And these cover our threatened corals here in Florida. So first up, I'll be going through the different branching and pillar corals. And first, we'll be starting with the staghorn coral, Acropora cervicornis. These corals can be found anywhere from 1 foot to 160 feet down. And thankfully, nothing else looks quite like them. And they're always going to be this orangish, brownish color. So they'll be easy to pick out. And they literally look like stag horns. So that's another easy way to help remember the name. Here we've got a staghorn thicket off the coast of Fort Lauderdale. Now you'll see at the tips of these branches, we have some white parts, and you might think, could that be coral bleaching? But the acroporids grow very, very fast. So these are actually segments of the corals that are growing faster than the zooxanthellae can come and inhabit the tissues. The other acropora we have here in the Caribbean is Acropora palmata, the elkhorn coral. And these look much less like stag antlers and more like elk or moose antlers. But you'll notice that you won't find elkhorn corals as deep as you will the staghorn corals. They peter out at about 55 feet. And if you're trying to remember the scientific name, I always think palm of my hand, flat, like palmata. Next up is the pillar coral, Dendrogyra cylindris. These corals can be found anywhere from 4 feet to 65 feet deep, and the pillars can grow to anywhere from 4 feet to 10 feet tall. But the pillars themselves aren't very wide. They're about 3 to 5 inches thick, and they form these spires. My favorite part about the pillar corals is their polyps. When the tentacles are extended, I think they look kind of fuzzy. And here you can see that the pillar corals are always going to form an encrusting base, and then the pillars will grow up from there. Next, we'll be learning about 3 of the threatened star corals, which are considered encrusting, mound, and boulder corals. These are the Orbicella species, Orbicella annularis, franksi, and faviolata. I'll teach you how to tell these 3 apart. First up, we've got the mountainous star coral, Orbicella faviolata. Again, these can be found anywhere from 6 feet all the way down to 130 feet. And this depth range is the same for all of these star corals. The colonies can grow to be up to 10 feet and they form massive mounds. But when you get deeper with these star corals, you'll see morphology. They'll turn more into plates and sheets. But you can always identify Orbicella faviolata by looking for golf ball shaped mounds that tend to run in parallel, either across or down the colony. And these corallites are pretty conical in shape. And again, you can see the calyx is protruding above the colony here. And these tend to be purple or tan or brownish corals. Here you can see more of the brownish color. And again, those parallel lines of kind of a golf ball shape. Orbicella annularis is the lobed star coral. Now, whenever I see this coral, I always think potatoes. Again, they have the same depth range and the colony size of the others. And the colonies grow in thick clusters, basically, of potatoes. And I usually always see these colonies as yellow. So look for yellow potatoes and you'll have Orbicella annularis. Next up is Orbicella franksi. Again, same depth, same colony size. And these colonies are much more lumpy and irregular here. And you'll also see that they have some azooxanthellate segments as well. So again, this doesn't mean coral bleaching, but there are just some parts of the colony that don't have zooxanthellae. So when you're looking at a picture of the three of them, Orbicella annularis is going to look like potatoes. Orbicella franxi on the right is going to look a bit more clumpy, and you might see some white spots. And Orbicella fabulata is going to be a bit smoother, and you're going to look for those parallel golf ball patterns. Next up, we're going to learn the one threatened species of fleshy coral here in Florida, and that is Mycetophyllla ferox, which is pictured on the right here. Now, this depth range is way different from the other corals we've been learning about. You can find this cactus coral all the way down to 240 feet, and the colony size can range from 4 inches to 2 feet wide, and it's going to look more like a plate, as you can see here. Now, these cactus corals are tough to tell apart at the species level, but if you're looking to identify the rough cactus coral, you want to be looking for these kind of reddish pink knobby polyp mouths. All of the pictures, or most of the pictures, and a lot of the suggestions in this presentation were pulled from this reef coral identification book, which I definitely recommend if you want to learn more about Caribbean corals. Now, I know I was just talking about all of these threatened corals, and it can be kind of worrisome to think what's happening to them out there. But the Coral Reef Conservation Program has 5 different coordinators, me included, who focus on the 5 key threats to our reefs. So I focus on the lack of awareness and appreciation of our reef resources, and my colleagues focus on maritime industry and coastal construction impacts, land-based sources of pollution, fishing, diving, and other uses, and reef resilience. If you enjoyed learning how to identify these threatened corals, you can learn how to identify many more by watching our video recordings of Coral Reef Webinar Week, where you can watch an entire Stony Coral ID video. Thank you, and feel free to contact me at michelle.graulty@floridadep.gov.